Good day, everyone. This is J.S. Serna, the group leader of the last group, and I am going to report about Module 4, Lesson 1, What is Sports Psychology? So, in this video presentation, the content of the lesson is first the objective of the lesson, 2, what is sports psychology, 3, the history of sports psychology, and 4, the topics that are being tackled in sports psychology. So let's go to the objectives. In this lesson, the students should be able to 1. Familiarize what is sports psychology and its history, and value the importance of sports psychology. So let's go to what is sports psychology. Okay, so sports psychology is the study of how psychological factors influence sports, athletic performance, exercise, and physical activity. Sports psychologists investigate how participating in sports can improve health and well-being. They also help athletes utilize psychology to improve their sports performance and mental well-being. So it is said here that it focuses on the athletic performance of an athlete based on their psychological capacity. Let's say, for example, every athlete should be strong, or let's say have a strong mental fortitude. So I think that's what sports psychology is all about. So they don't just work with elite and professional athletes. However, they also help regular people learn how to enjoy sports and learn to stick to an exercise program. They utilize exercise and athletics to enhance people's lives and well-being. So, as what I said earlier, it is focusing on the well-being of an athlete, but not just athlete or elite, may it be professional or elite, but also to people who would like to enjoy sports and exercise programs. The history of sports psychology. In this part, we all tackle about the history of sports psychology. So sports psychology is a relatively young discipline in psychology. So let's say that this is the youngest among the discipline in the psychology branch. So let's say, for example, sports psychology is the the youngest among the siblings. Okay. So the first research labs devoted to the topic were opened during the 1920s and the 1930s. After the first U.S. lab was closed during the early 1930s, research did not resume until the topic experienced a revival of interest during the 1960s. So it was born and somehow get lost and revived after or during the 1960s. The International Society of Sports Psychology, or ISSP, was established in 1965, and by the 1970s, sports psychology had been introduced to university course offerings throughout the North America. By the 1980s, sports psychology became the subject of a more rigorous scientific focus as researchers began to explore how psychology could be used to improve athletic performance, as well as how exercise could be utilized to improve mental well-being and lower stress levels. So now let's go to the topic being tackled in sports psychology. Attentional focus. Attentional focus involves the ability to tune out distractions, or let's say focusing on a specific task without getting bothered by something else. such as a crowd of screaming fans and focus attention on task at hand. So that is what I said earlier. So visualization and goal setting. I think that is very important to be tackled in sports psychology because most of the athletes are striving hard for to get that prestigious prize or something like that specific title. So this involves visualizing performing a task such as participating in an athletic event or successfully performing a particular skill. Next is motivation and team building. This is the extrinsic versus the intrinsic motivators. So in motivation, it is where yourself is very, you know, motivation is somewhat like deals with yourself. That is what I'm about to say. I'm going to say. And team building is somewhat like, let's say, for example, in team sports like volleyball, basketball, football, or any duo sports like badminton, tennis, something like that. There is something to deal with your partner so that the both of you can benefit and could get what you wanted or what your goal is, and anxiety and rehabilitation. So there are athletes that were that weren't able to participate, that weren't able to give their best because of an injury, and anxiety builds up whenever they are going to practice. Let's say, for example, they are going to think about what if I'm going to lose, what if I got injured myself, what if I injured myself rather. And rehabilitation, if there is someone that undergoes something like depression, sort of physical injury, this is where rehabilitation goes into. So I'm back, no? I am experiencing technical issues. Okay, anyway, the value or the importance of sports psychology in both sports and psychology is that this brings a drastic change to the world of sports and also in psychology, because what we aim to achieve is to that give the athletes or the people who want to play sports the best what do you call this, the best program that we can give to them so that they would be able to perform their performance to the highest extent. So thank you for listening, and that would be the end of my part.
Good day to each and everyone. I am Debbie M. Viola, and I will be reporting the Lesson 2 Coleman Griffith, the America's first sports psychologist, together with my partner, Mr. Francis Tagliamon. So, sports psychology. How sports psychology used in sports? What is the relationship of Coleman Griffith to sports psychology? So I've provided concept map here in sports psychology. It consists of athletic performance, anger management, behavioral issues, business, apply methods to reduce distraction, law enforcement, dealing with stressful condition, consultant, pyruvate, practice. These are the things that we would able to know or to understand based on or regarding on sports psychology. So Coleman Griffith, he is born on May 22, 1893 and died on February 7, 1966. American sports psychologist, born in Iowa. Griffith studied at Greenville College until 1915. In 1925, Coleman Griffith, recognized as the father of this science in the United States, established the Athletic Research Laboratory. Griffith had started his research into various sports science and psychology issues in 1918, and he introduced the first university level courses in sports psychology at the University of Illinois in 1923. As a result of Griffith's work at the University of Illinois, he published two seminal sports psychology books. The first psychology book was Psychology of Coaching, written in 1926, and the first ever sports psychology text. Griffith followed his work with the psychology of athletes in 1928. With the onset of the Great Depression in 1930, Griffith's psychology laboratory could not be sustained, and it was closed in 1932.
Thank you, Devi Viola. Now, in 1938, Griffith was hired by the Chicago Cubs, a baseball club, in order to provide an advice as to the psychological factors at play in the structure and performance of their team. Because of this, Griffith was the first psychologist ever retained by a professional sports team for this purpose. Griffith worked with the Cubs for 3 seasons, with few of his recommendations implemented by the team management. Next, Griffith's work is all the more significant when one considers that there was no major sports psychology research conducted in North America from the time of the closure of the Griffith Laboratory until the mid-1960s. Okay, that's the end of our report in Lesson 2, Coleman Griffith, the America's first sports psychologist. And we will end our report with the saying, to be successful, you need to face your hardest opponent, yourself, by Dillion Boucher. Thank you.
Hello, good day everybody. I am the next reporter, and for today I will be discussing the current status of sports psychology. But before that, we will define first what is sports psychology. Well, sports psychology is the study of how psychological factors influence sports, athletic performance, exercise, and physical activity. Sports psychology or sports psychology is the scientific study of the psychological factors that influence performance in sports. On the other hand, sports psychology professionals aim to increase athletic performance by instilling mental toughness and minimizing the psychological effects of poor performance. Now, if you ask, how is the sports psychology today? Well, sports psychology today is an online sports training resource provided by Mental Edge Athletics, LCC, to educate athletes, parents, and coaches of the mental skills needed to reach peak performance and excel in sports. Nevertheless, our goal is to provide our readers with the highest quality sports psychology and mental training resources to help improve their overall performance and at the same time get the most out of their practice and enjoy their athletic experience. So next slide is sports psychology today, moving to a global future. Well, sport and exercise psychology today is different from the discipline that emerged in the 1960s. Scholars have responded to public concern with increased research on health-oriented exercise, and many sports psychologists focus on youth development following a positive psychology approach. And also, some researchers emphasize theory-based research with tight controls, while others use interpretive approaches and search for experiential knowledge. Some do no research but use information to educate, consult, or clinically treat sport and exercise participants. Okay, so now to fully understand sports psychology, we must ask ourselves two very important questions. First is, what is sports psychology? As what I have been discussing earlier. And second, who is it for? Well, put in the most simple way, sports psychology can be an example of psychological knowledge, principles, or methods applied to the world of sport. There are two psychologists, Banker and McGuire, say that sports psychology is not for psychologists, but is for sport and its participants. And also, according to my research, there are some conflicts and challenges along the way, but despite all of that, I believe that sports psychology remains permanently bonded to psychology through its common interest in the fundamental principles of psychology, human behavior, and experience. And I believe that no one can deny the significant role which sports recreation plays in very culture and society across the globe. And in the Western and Eastern worlds alike, sports and leisure continue to support huge industries and take up massive amounts of individual time, effort, money, energy, and emotion. Now, as we look into sports psychology, I believe we are confronted by a landscape of knowledge which rises and falls often suddenly and dramatically. And according to what I've read, around the 1960s, scientific traditions, institutions, and publications each prospered to this first came into being. And also, it was this era which truly marked the structural genesis of modern-day sports psychology. However, there are still many untouched aspects of sports psychology today. Nevertheless, in order for us to determine whether psychology plays a significant role in the mind of a young athlete, we must look at the uses and techniques of sports psychology. On the other hand, sports psychologists over the years have maintained a keen interest in psychological profiling and have been naturally drawn to the quantification of personality variables. As sport itself revolves around the measurement and reward of individual differences in performances, it is no surprise that scientists quantify psychological differences rather than sporting differences. So that would be all my report. I hope you learn a lot. So God bless and stay safe, everyone. Have a nice day.
And for the present status of sports psychology, more exclusive and diverse research questions and methods for the problem-focused approach, cultural praxis approach to interventions, appropriate training of future sports psychologists, growth in specialization, job market expands but must be supplemented with non-traditional career options and consulting. And lastly, greater acceptance of sports psychology within mainstream psychology. That's all for the present status of sports psychology. And for our saying or our quote for today, every practice and competition begins with the way you think. The quality of your thoughts is critical. Think in ways that promotes the outcome that you desire. It is by Stephanie C. Cockley. Thank you.